Started. Call the meeting to order. I'm going to do a roll call at this moment. Mayor Pro Tem, are you here? Okay. Councilman Reimenbach, you here? Councilmember Anderson, are you here? Councilmember Barnett, are you here?
Here.
Councilmember Spears, are you here?
Here.
Councilmember Waddell, are you here? And the chair is here. C1 is approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to apply for North Carolina Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant for Olson Park Phase 2. Yes, sir, go ahead.
That's a grant and it's a budget impact.
The money's already included in the bond funds that has the match.
Okay.
C3 is a resolution awarding the 2023 annual needs Brick Street maintenance contract to Jens LLC of Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, in the amount of $910,653.80. C4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to apply for the Governor's Highway Safety Program grant in the amount of $25,000. C5 is a resolution approving renewal of cybersecurity software from Cambridge Computer Services Incorporated of Waltham, Massachusetts for $131,200 for the year 2023 with up to 3 additional annual renewals. C6 is a resolution approving renewal of mobile device management from Dell Marketing Limited Partnerships of Round Rock, Texas for $30,875. C7 is a resolution to reject a bid from a parent low bidder as not responsible and authorize negotiations with Samet Corporation for the construction of the River Lights Fire Station No. 6 project. Public hearings, PH1 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wilmington, North Carolina, approving an amendment to an installment financing contract in the amount not to exceed $70 million to finance the acquisition of a downtown campus, including a building, a parking deck, and related property, and providing for certain other related matters thereto.
Quick question on it.
Yes, sir.
So, and it may just be an education for me on the bond sales process, but if we go ahead and approve this, get this moving, and have that financing in place, and just straw man the argument that the market drastically changes, we as a body opt not to purchase the building, what then happens to those funds?
Jennifer, if you'd come forward, please.
Good morning. So yes, we've approved the financing for the bonds, and then it goes to the Local Government Commission on May 2nd for them to approve. We're pricing the bonds on June 28th. So we have a not to exceed $70 million. So if the price of the bonds pulls us above that amount, we cannot move forward. We'd have to go back and start over with council and then the LGC again.
So we wouldn't actually get them until that June 28th?
June 28th is when we price the bonds,
Okay.
and then we close on the financing July 12th.
Okay, so that gives us that basically 2-week window to price the bonds, close the property.
Right. We're closing on the financing July 12th and closing on the property July 13th if we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Ordinances 01 is an ordinance making a supplemental appropriation to the engineering operating account in the amount of $8,651 for monies received from the North Carolina Department of Justice for damages to city property. And then 02A is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation in the amount of $270,508 to the Oleander Drive Sidewalk Improvement Project from Hawthorne Road to 42nd Street from the Transportation Bonds Contingency Bike/Ped Projects Fund. And then 02B is the resolution authorizing the award of a construction contract in the amount of $719,078.91 to Morgan Trucking and General Construction Incorporated of Charlotte, North Carolina, for the Oleander Drive Sidewalk Improvement Project from Hawthorne Road to 42nd Street. Yes, sir.
How many, I know we've had trouble getting responsive to bids. How many did we get on this?
I'm not sure. I'll ask Richard Murphy to come forward. He's the project manager on this.
Mainly, I'm just kind of wondering where this guy fell in, you know, what the range was.
Good morning,
Good
Mayor
morning.
and council members. Yes, this was the second time we bid it, and there were 2 bidders.
Two?
Two.
Okay. Was there a drastic difference in the two?
Yeah, this bid was actually within 5% of our original estimate, and the second bidder was, he was like 10%, so he was 5% more. He was right in the middle.
Okay. And two's okay?
For the second time,
For the second time, it's okay to get just
Yes.
two?
yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Then resolutions, R1 is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Four Seasons Demolition Incorporated in the amount of $97,800 for professional demolition services for structures located at 820 North 2nd Street. And then we have RP1s as council's appointments committees for boards and commissions, and Councilman Rivenbark will be giving us a report from that committee. And that concludes this agenda. Mr. Caudle, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, this morning we have one presentation for you. As you know, we're getting ready to try to do the repaving on Fifth Avenue restriping project. That project has generated a great deal of interest, and the staff has reached out into the community quite extensively. We'd like to give you the update on where the project is, what the public feedback we got was, and then ask if you have any questions going forward. Dave Mays will review this project for us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Actually, you're going to get a little bit of me and some of Mr. Patterson. I'll give you a brief overview of the project, and Jared's going to come up and talk about the community engagement that we had related to the project. So as a quick overview, we're going to do street resurfacing on Fifth Avenue all the way from Market Street all the way down to Greenfield Street. Everything will be restriped at the end of that. We're going to be doing sidewalk rehabilitation along the way. That includes filling in gaps, fixing broken panels, doing ADA ramps. We'll also be fixing concrete curb where it's broken and where it's missing, and some upgrades to stormwater drains along the way. CFPUA is going to be replacing 100% of their infrastructure within this same corridor. Water mains, water services, and sewer mains and services as well. The trees within the center median will be removed, the large oak trees. And we've engaged a landscape architect to help determine what's going to replace those trees. This is a long project. We're estimating about 2 full years for completion. We've coordinated this effort with the utility authority. We'll be doing this in sections. The utility work will go first. All of their work is underground, so they're going to be doing their work first. Their contractor will be in a certain section of the project. And once they're complete with that section, our contractor will move in after that, and their contractor will move to a different section. We'll certainly be happy to keep you informed along the way. So those phases, the first thing that will actually happen is the trees in the center median will be removed. Second will be the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority work. Third will be our streets and sidewalk work. And lastly, the last thing will be the landscaping component. And again, as I said, we've got some community engagement things that we can report to you this morning as well. A little bit of background on some of the elements. Street resurfacing, the pavement condition index for this section of Fifth Avenue ranges between the score of 19 to 49. And yes, that is out of a score of 100, so there's no mystery here that we have a failing pavement condition for the extent of this project. That's as a result of extensive utility cuts within the corridor. The age of the pavement leads to both potholes and alligator cracking. We'll be doing a full depth milling of somewhere between 2 and 3 inches, and ultimately resurfacing about 6.5 lane miles of street. Restriping, currently we have 2 through lanes both in the north and south directions with parking lanes on both sides. There are crosswalks at several major intersections. What we are proposing is 1 travel through lane both in the north and south direction, one bike lane in the north and south direction, and maintaining that parking lane on both sides. We'll be adding crosswalks at several intersections as well, including Greenfield, Marsteller, and Ann Street. Curbing and sidewalk improvements, we're adding about 2,100 feet of new sidewalk. Most of that exists down on the Greenfield Street side of the project. We'll be repairing about 2,200 feet of broken sidewalk panels. We're adding 11 new ADA sidewalk ramps, and we're repairing about 55 of those same ramps. When we resurface the street, we're required to bring an existing ramp up into compliance with current standards, and that's what those 55 locations include. In addition, we're adding about 1,400 feet of new curb and gutter where it currently does not exist, and we'll be repairing about 500 feet where, in the example shown, you can see some of it is uplifted. Tree removal, there's about 40 plus large Darlington oaks in the median. They're underneath Duke Energy's power lines. They're diseased and decaying. Half of them will be in conflict with the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority work, where their water or sewer services have to cross that median. They're in conflict, so those trees need to be removed anyway. Back in 2011, Council did act to end tree replacement in Fifth Avenue median. We've been given different direction to make sure that we come back with a landscaping effort within the median. There is also fairly extensive protection of the live oaks that are in the plaza area on the sides of the street, not in the center median, but on the sides of the street. The Cape Fear Utility Authority is going through extensive measures to make sure that their work will do minimal damage to the tree root zones of those trees that are on the side, unless the tree is already in distress. And again, there's been potential community concern over the tree loss and the alteration to that center median. I'd like to bring Jared up and let him talk to you a little bit about the community engagement event. My hats go off to Jared. He did a really good job putting together this event. It was very well attended. We got a lot of good feedback. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jared.
Morning. So this project began as really a street resurfacing and sidewalk improvement project as far as the city was concerned. When CFPUA's water and sewer work was then brought alongside it, gave us the opportunity to align these projects and take a more holistic view of them. What we see in that more holistic view is now the opportunity to transform this section of Fifth Avenue into a linear parkway that connects historic downtown with Greenfield Lake. We have made community engagement a priority in this process because of the magnitude of the work taking place and the opportunity to really kind of transform this stretch of road in a better way. We had an engagement meeting with several groups here in council chambers. It was very well attended, had over 100 folks, well over 100 folks attend. We were joined by CFPUA and Duke Energy at that event. We sent mailings out into the affected area, put a web page together, hired a landscape architect who also joined us at this event in order to get together with members of the community, collect feedback for the preferences, and also listen to some of their concerns and give them the opportunity to one-on-one interface with staff, ask questions. How's this project going to work? How's it going to impact me in my daily life, in my home, and my street? What we saw was some real preferences expressed. Here's the results of the feedback form that we gave folks the opportunity to interact with what the future conditions of this street, and in particular the median, would look like. Preferences expressed for something that's going to be well maintained into the future, the historic nature of this road and many of the aspects within the median. There's some just neat little features throughout that folks wanted to make sure got signified and protected. I will say the elephant in the room was the overhead power lines. That was certainly the most common concern that we heard. They restrict tree height, they impair the overall appearance of the street. I want to show you some of the renderings that have come out of this we'll get back to the overhead power lines issue in just a second, but I want to show you 3 renderings that our landscape architect has put together based on the feedback that we received from the community. Here's a rendering. It demonstrates to you, one, you'll see the incorporation of some small trees, native shrubs, flowering plants, as well as the new striping along the road with 1 through lane of traffic, dedicated bike lane, full on-street parking, and continuous ADA accessible sidewalk. Here's a second rendering for you, kind of a variation on the theme. And then I've got a third rendering that shows you the protection of some of those aspects in the median that are kind of unique to this stretch of road. There are a number of historical artifacts and features both in the median and along the road. The community has expressed interest and willingness to help identify those so that we can incorporate those into future plans. Also of note, this stretch of road is part of the Cape Fear Historic Byway, which gives us another opportunity to signify the historic nature of this part of town. Elephant in the room would be the overhead power lines. It was a major point of community concern. I will point out it was never part of the scope of this project. This was originally a street resurfacing and sidewalk improvement project. The scope really kind of grew when CFPUA came alongside and we aligned those projects and noticed the significant number of tree conflicts with the utility work. We explored a couple of different options for how we deal with this elephant. One possibility might have been to elevate the power lines by 15 feet. That would cost us about $800,000, but it really would give us limited benefits. It'd give us a little bit more height, but not a lot, and it would require quite a bit of coordination, and we still have lower utilities that are riding on those power lines as well that we'd have to deal with. Another possibility would be burying the power lines. We looked into that, and it could really approach about $8 million in order to bury those utility lines. It would require a significant amount of coordination, engineering funding, and would delay the city street resurfacing project from perhaps 1 to 2 years in order to make that happen.
You said that Duke Energy took part in your community meeting?
Yes.
Are they going to be any kind of a partner in this?
They were there certainly for educational purposes to explain to residents how they make decisions on what power lines get undergrounded and so forth. But in terms of cost sharing, we haven't really been able to explore that or see any.
And relocating the lines to a parallel street was not discussed or an option?
That had not been discussed, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question. Jared, question.
Yes, sir.
So I guess you're going to get to this in a minute. What will be our option for those lines?
Well, as it turns
What
out,
do we do?
my next slide has some options.
Thank you, sir.
So we've got a few options on how to deal with the elephant in the room. The first one would be to stay the course. We have dedicated significant resources now to landscaping and doing the best we can within our current project budget and our current project scope to create a very attractive street that works around the presence of those power lines. The second option would be to change course and to proceed with the CFPUA work. Let CFPUA patch the asphalt, and then we can pause to fund or coordinate the undergrounding of utilities before completing the city's portion of the street, sidewalk, and landscape work. That would require significant expense. We'd have to probably find about $8 million in the couch cushions in order to do that. And we also note that it's not really been evaluated against other priorities, and it could leave the road in an unfinished condition for several years as we went through that process. There is also a third option that we have identified, which would be to go ahead and stay the course with the current project, but then begin planning for the future. So complete the project as planned, and then intentionally explore the undergrounding of the power lines and overhead utilities as a potential future project. For example, a future transportation bond project.
Wouldn't that, if you're undergrounding them, wouldn't that go back? That's why we coordinate with CFPUA.
The situation that we would find ourselves in if we were to pause now and try to do that undergrounding is that it would cause delay with the project that we currently have.
I get that part. My part is if we plan for the future and we come back 5 or 7 years from now, you got to go back in and tear up what's been put down.
Yes, sir. And what we've noticed is that a lot of the median work would not be for loss. The types of plantings that would take place there could be relocated and reused so that we wouldn't be necessarily out that, as well as by the time the undergrounding would take place of those utilities, the number of years of that new asphalt would have been such that we wouldn't be tearing up brand new asphalt. It would already have been several years through its usable life. So we could kind of see a situation where that could potentially work together. I want to point out as well that would provide us a process to be able to evaluate some competing priorities and to plan for the funding for a pretty significant chunk of money for that type of a project. We do have the Greater Downtown planning process that's going to begin July 1, which is a fairly propitious opportunity to begin exploring that. And then we do anticipate that we could be ready for a prospective transportation bond somewhere between 2024 and 2026 to be able to secure funding if that were the route that you would choose to go. I would invite any questions. I'd be happy to take easy questions, and Mr. Mays would be happy to take any difficult questions.
Would the bearing in either of the options, if we're discussing bearing, that also takes into account burying the Spectrum and the AT&T lines?
That's what really takes the price up to kind of approaching that $8 million figure that we've identified.
Okay.
A question, Garrett. Jared, my thought is, okay, if we start burying the lines here, would we not also, would that make a precedent that we need precedents that we need to bury the lines other places? You know?
I believe the question I heard was, if we bury the lines here, does that establish a precedent that we then need to bury the lines in other places?
Right.
And I think that that's something that we would be evaluating through a planning process. The Greater Downtown Plan is going to look at 18 neighborhoods within the core of the city with a significant amount of community engagement, which could then feed into a planning process where we could evaluate what the cost implications and the priorities of something like that would ultimately look like.
Okay. And so originally, this plan, we didn't consider burying the lines at all. I mean, it's kind of like a last-minute thing.
Yes, sir. The project from the city's side really just began as a street resurfacing and sidewalk improvement project. It grew when we saw what CFPUA was planning with their full replacement of the water and sewer lines and the significant number of conflicts that was going to create with those large trees in the median. When we put all of that together, we recognized that the scope of what we were looking at had really grown far beyond simply a street resurfacing and sidewalk improvement project. And so that's why the power lines really never entered into the equation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
A couple of quick things. I saw that Duke Power participated in your, are they willing to participate in putting the lines underground? Seems like it would be a good thing for them.
I don't know that I'd be able to speak to that currently, but I'm
Have
sure
you
that
had
those
that
conversations could take place. Initial conversations have taken place, but really just very exploratory, and not to be able to speak to the question that you have at this point, no.
Another sort of tangential question. Was DOT aware of the reconfiguration of this when they decided to put in all these stoplights along? I guess their stoplights were on 3rd, not 5th. Yeah, sorry.
See if Dave maybe will.
Forget it.
The stoplights are on 3rd.
Sorry, my error.
Jared, when Market Street got reconfigured in the 90s, they had the same problems as Fifth Avenue does, crotch trees and what have you, nothing could anyway mature. And digging and burying them was an option at the time, and just like this one, it was just didn't make sense, cost effective. So move the lines over to Dock Street. And it had to be a lot cheaper. So before we put this to bed, at least ask that,
Yes, sir.
okay? Because that would solve the problem. Okay.
So on the landscaping, and one of the things that, and this is when I asked for this, to see if we could elevate the lines somewhat, because when you go down to Wrightsville Beach, along, I believe, which is that Pelican Drive, the trees, the canopy of the trees, the live oaks there are coming together, and you can't even see the power lines. And then when you looked up, you saw that they had extended them, so they don't have to go in there and butcher the trees. Obviously, that may not be an option here that we're going to support, but we do need some sort of a tree, and I believe the only thing, and then, Mayor Pro Tem, you have a concern about the crepe myrtles. It's the only tree that I'm aware of, or the bush, or whatever you can, that can grow up where you can kind of crop it or, shape it the way you want to, and at the same time block those lines. And if we're going to go in that particular route, I would hope that whatever flowering tree or bush or whatever we have there grows high enough so you can kind of block that, which I believe you can do with the crepes.
The difficulty that we run into is there's an approved set of trees and plants from Duke for what they want to have planted underneath power lines, and that really limits our ability to identify species that are going to be able to do that. Sure. But we can give the instruction to the landscape architect to, within those parameters, to maximize the amount of shielding that he can.
And we're talking about irrigation in this particular medium also? 'Cause you've got a
Irrigation
lot
is
of
not
planting.
part of this right now, no. And the planning would be done such that it wouldn't need to be irrigated.
They would have to be?
Would not need to be irrigated. Once you get them established, they would be planted with species that would be able to
Interesting.
sustain themselves.
Okay. This is a question for Dave. Dave, on the bike lane, what I have seen in other communities and cities is that they paint that lane green, blue, to identify it. Are we going to do that here?
I can certainly have that discussion with our traffic engineer. I'm not prepared to make that recommendation, but there is, it's not just a standard 3-foot
6
lane
foot,
that you
I see
might-
that.
Yeah, so it's got some width to it, and I'll be happy to discuss that with Dennis and let you know what.
Or even if you don't paint the lane, at least the stripes, that'll be much more profound than just the white stripes, because if somebody's, obviously you're reducing this from 2 lanes to 1 lane with this bike lane, and I just think that the bike lane should be really well defined.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Caudle?
Mr. Mayor, we have 2 committees that were scheduled to meet this morning. The naming committee will be rescheduled by the chair so that there will be no conflicts. The governance committee meets immediately after this meeting. Okay. That's all we have for you.
Very good. Okay. With that, we stand adjourned.
All right. Thank you, guys.